I began at the age of 7 to get nearsighted, so I would read, and everything was mushy, as it somewhat is now, only more so. But they wouldn't let me get glasses till I was about 13. So for 5 years or so, I felt my way around in the world. And they finally got me glasses when the school said either he gets glasses or he goes to a class for the blind. Because I couldn't see the blackboard, I couldn't really do anything. And I didn't want to learn Braille and all that stuff. I finally got them to work. And the first sight, the night I got them was a December night, and it was snowing. I put the glasses on, and he said, "Now look." And I looked out the window and I saw snowflakes. I had never seen snowflakes. I'd seen snow as white gush and vagueness in the sky, but the actual glint of the flakes as they came down still strikes me as one of the most wonderful things I've ever seen, that moment of utter clarity. So I like to be as clear as I can. I don't like to be soft focus. Why am I not willing to see with the eyes that God gave me, so to speak? And if they want to see close here and vague there, why not let them? I wrote a series of poems once called Natural Eyes, in which I took up a poem by somebody else, Keats, I remember starting with, I don't know who else I did, and I put it at the normal reading distance, which is about here, and I took off my glasses and wrote what I saw. And some of the words were right, most were wrong. So I transcribed that to how my natural eyes, read Keats or Shelley or whatever I was reading. I think, as Brackett says, it's very important to go with that natural situation of the eye and see how far it takes you. The selfic energy manifests everywhere that you look, and your looking makes it manifest. It's your attention to it that elicits the energy from the thing seen. You know that, yes? That it's by looking at it, by your attention to something, that you make something work, that it comes to life. Not by anything casual. It's never going to talk to you unless you look at it carefully. And that, again, writing down is about something like that. It's almost the kind of infantile, "Well, Mr. Table, what do you have to tell me today?" I will write down whatever comes into my mind while I am looking at you. That. The sense of being utterly at the mercy of the thing you're looking at. Poetry is nothing but answering, that we'd spend our whole lives answering a question that's not asked. The unasked question is so powerful, and we feel compelled to answer it. I do. I have to write every day. Every day I have to write, because otherwise I get somehow psychically sick, because I haven't been answering. And maybe someday, if I write enough, it won't be that I've answered the question, but I will have been maybe entitled to hear it, whatever that question is. You must think at times of deities and other powers and things beyond our normal everyday perception. And those are hard things to think about, aren't they? They're both alluring and frightening. How nice to have a personal God or an angel or something like that. How terrifying and how interesting and how intimate. Those are good things to think about, but not everybody thinks about them. I think it's interesting that we live in a world where a lot of people never think those thoughts. It wakes us up, it makes us ask questions, it gives us things to think about, and it gives us thinking to think about. It unanswers everything. It constantly answers. All it is an answer. It's a revelation and an answer. If the poem doesn't tell you anything, you don't have to bother with it anymore. You write in the hopes that you'll learn something. Or I write in the hopes that I'll learn something from the divine language that runs through me. The language which is itself divine and that runs through us. The Greeks, who were foolish in some ways, were not foolish when they spoke of language as having a divine origin. It is God in man. If anything is God in man, it's language. That is so. And it teaches us. So I write to learn. I'm sure you do too. Why is it that I so trust desire? And I tried to work it out today with the thought that we trust desire we should trust desire because desires are, in fact, radical to our identities in this life, or the only life we know. They're radical. I want what I want because I'm me. That's the closest thing I can come to knowing it. I can know who I am by what I desire, by what I'm afraid of. Years ago, I wrote a stupid little poem that said, fear and lust, trust nothing else. Okay. And in that sense, trust desire, which is not to say indulge it or do it. I think we can consciously know our desires and consciously choose if we prefer not to indulge them. But we must know them and trust them that they are our desires. And the contradiction of guilt is that there is someone outside us saying, no, don't trust your desire. Don't trust your fear. You shouldn't be afraid of snakes. You shouldn't want to do that. You should instead conform to another image built in the world around you. And in the guilt culture that I'm familiar with, the world creates images in the form of expectations. That a man like me should do such and such a thing. A man like you should do such and such a thing. If I'm not living up to that image, that expectation, I am somehow in a state of anxiety, i.e. neurosis. That all of our unhappiness that I know about, apart from that which comes from the physical sickness itself, which in itself, as we know, may arise from mental disorder, all of the things that we usually call unhappiness, I wouldn't say disease, but simply what we call unhappiness, seems to me to arise from a refusal to recognize the difference between what one organically, genuinely, karmically is motivated to want or not want, and on the other hand, the things that we're expected to know. I mean, how am I supposed to be perceived as a great poet if I instead pick my nose and go to baseball games? I'm making a joke of it, but the contrast between what we actually want to do and what we think we're supposed to do. And that's where I think guilt has its function in creating the capitalist society we live in, a society based upon how we're supposed to look to other people. I would, strictly speaking, say that there is, when you enter a poem, writing it, there is a form that begins to manifest. And as you go through the act of writing it, the form becomes more and more compelling. Offers you options and denies you options, and as the form begins to declare itself, and only when it draws you to its fulfillment of its own form, can the poem be said to be done. I imagine in the same way, if you look at a woman with desire, that same sort of, there's a formal presence of what it would be like to have a relationship with her. So an inch out from the relationship, maybe we're just going to talk about her poems. Or, no, maybe we're going to go skiing together and then say, whatever it may be. But the form is building. So without the energy of desire, the form would not even occur. But as it builds, the radical hypothesis of our existence, that we are totally enlightened beings, and we're utter fuck-ups. And each does not deny the other, and each is true. But each is the unsaying or the away-turning of the other. And in that away-turning, we get the energy to do something about the situation. Hypothesis is itself a source of energy. That you're not doing it to make some kind of philosophical point. This is so, but this is so, or not so, or no, it's unsayable, or we cannot define the indefinable, blah, blah, blah. But rather that in the act of turning away from what we have said, in turning our back on the proposition, whatever that is, God exists, we turn away God. Without saying God does not exist, that's no more interesting a proposition than that. The first. But in the turning away, we acquire energy, as you would have once said, torsion, because it's a twist. Hypothesis is twisting. You're always turning from something said to something not yet said, from something thought to something not yet thought. And the unthought, the lure of the unthought, which when we're writing poems, we're realizing that we are being magnetized by the last line. We're being pulled. That the way Dante is pulled to that love that moves the sun out of the stars, you can feel that for the whole stupid poem. You can feel that one line dragging him through his experience. Something like that line. He doesn't know what form it will take, But the magnetic power of the final form is the power of the unthought, which was what you called the unthought earlier. I like the sense that the intimate is that which is most deeply connected with the structure of reality. And, of course, what I've been thinking about is what everybody else has been thinking about for 6,000 years, is the structure of appearance and the structure of reality, one structure, or are there two different structures? So the way I've been thinking about that lately has to do with prophecy. And that's been interesting to me. How come we know the future? Which is actually only a specialized case of a stranger question, but the one that we never ask. How come we know the past? How can we know anything about the past? How can we remember? Now, I've been thinking that remembering is actually as weird and as bizarre and as, what's the word I want, New Age, a concept as prophecy is. We accept it without ever really challenging it. Why do we remember? What is it that we remember? How can we remember? So I've been thinking about the fractal nature of time. That if I'm right in thinking about the fractal nature of anything, the pattern that we see at the moment is, quote, the same shape, unquote, in a fractal sense, as what was yesterday and as what tomorrow will be. But there are different scales. So from the perception of the present, we intuit a past, which we affect to remember, and then we intuit, probably with the same imagistic detail, we intuit a tomorrow, a future, but have no confidence at all in what we see there. So I'm thinking how interesting it would be if, instead of thinking of time as an arrow or a line along which we move, or a circle to which we recur, on which we recur, if we could instead think of time as a structure, as a building, an object even, one of those Platonic solids that we used to talk about so much when we wanted to have an icosahedron on the table and a dodecahedron in the pocket. Suppose time were a solid then, a solid into which we move wormhole-wise. I like thinking about that because it brings me to the sense of the identity of appearance and reality. And it seems to me that I'm talking with a man who knows how to look at a stone. I'm supposed to be giving a reading in March with a man who knows how to go into a stone, Clayton Eshelman. He and I are reading in New York. And Clayton is a man who was brave enough to go into the earth, who penetrated the interior of the earth without any sense of alchemical impressment. He just went there, goes there again and again. I couldn't. Terrifies me, the notion of being inside a stone. Yeah, and you can look at them. You can do more than look. I can look at them and think about them. Clayton can go into them. You can pick them up and float them. You can make them rise and support themselves, dance, so to say. So the stone has been, thinking about Clayton's reading that I have to give, thinking about your stone, since I knew we'd be talking about you, I realized that the stone is sort of the essence of what we have to consider. Time as a stone. As I so need to believe that appearance is reality, despite all the contrarian Platonic gestures that we've been making all our lives, that if we can but bring ourselves to gaze at appearance with the same reverence and detail that you gaze at your stones before you say, "Arise, sir," stand up. And you do that, talita kumi, to the stone, where Jesus says, "Get up, little girl," and the dead woman rises up. So you say to the stone, "Talita kumi," get up, little girl, or little boy, or old gentleman, or however you address them. I don't know your magic. But you say something to them and they rise. In that sense, if we can look at all appearance that way, this gear, this wall, this chair, this self, even this head, to make it somehow, to be so intimately acquainted with it that you let it speak, and that is to say, rise. Because to me, rising and speaking are indistinguishable. You wake talking, and you know you're asleep when you stop talking. I'm answering, but it doesn't do the tape any good at all. Except that cameras can read the mind too. Sometimes you have to block them out.